do today is we're gonna like explore this software called Minitab. I don't know if any of you have heard it before. If you know someone who's in Math 155, they'll tell you how much they hate Minitab. Okay, it's like this software system. It's very similar to Microsoft Excel, except it can do like a little bit more stuff. Yeah, so we're gonna take a look at some Minitab. Okay, so let me just show you how to get onto it. Okay, so actually, all of you have a free subscription to this thing called Minitab, okay? You just have to go to minitab.com, most creative website title ever, right? And if you go to like your account, you can actually sign in with like your Gauls email address, salisbury.edu, okay? And it'll bring you to this. You'll click on Minitab. You don't have to do this ever, so don't pay attention to this too hard. But you'll get to this thing called Minitab, which looks like this, okay? And this like horizontal bar, this actually goes up and down so that, well, it kind of looks like an Excel document, but there's some space above it for graphs to show up and all that stuff. Okay. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go through this thing. It's a Minitab lab that I give my 155 students, but I thought that we should just look at it now. And what we're gonna do is we're actually gonna start with number 3. Okay, actually, don't go there yet. Don't go there yet. Okay. Okay, so on our sheet, right, we have a bunch of names. So C1, C2, and C3, okay? I'm gonna name them. I don't want them to be called C1, C2, C3. I wanna like name them something. And what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna name the first one normal, n equals 50, okay? I'm gonna name the second one, oh, this thing pops up, I hate it, okay? Normal, n equals 100. And then I'm going to call C3 normal n equals 10,000. Okay, so a lot of stuff in there. Okay, so now I've just labeled what C1, C2, and C3 are. Okay, I don't know if we'll have enough time for 1 and 2 because I just realized I have to take a phone call at like 1:40, so you're gonna have to like leave by then. But what we're gonna do is just flip to the next page, and we're gonna start with number 3. Okay, so number 3. Is telling us that Minitab can actually ask us to make samples of size anything that we want, okay? So let's just say I wanted to take a situation where I knew that that it was normally distributed, okay? And I wanted to come up with a sample of size 50, okay? What I have in the first box is I have a bunch of stuff that you can click on to see what happens to do that, okay? So I'm gonna click calc. I'm never gonna expect you to do this, by the way, but you can just follow along with me. Random data, okay? And it'll give me this box, and I can tell it what or how many people are in my samples. So 50 people are in my sample, I'll type in 50, okay? I want it to be stored in the column n equals 50, right? I want it to come from the normal distribution. Now, there actually are a lot of different distributions that we haven't talked about. There's all of these different ones. If you become a statistician, you'll learn about every single type of distribution out there. But normal is the most common, right? So let's do the normal, okay? The mean, I'm just gonna keep it as the mean of 0, standard deviation 1. That's kind of like a basic normal distribution, but of course, if we were doing something different, we could have a different mean, different standard deviation, right? Okay, I'm gonna click okay. And let's see what happens. Ooh, look at that. In C1, I have all these different numbers here over here, right? So I have 50 different numbers. This actually is a sample of size 50, right? There's 50 numbers put down in column 1. Does that kind of make sense? Yeah. All right. I'm going to do the same thing now, okay? So the second box tells you how to do this for a sample of size 100, which literally is the same thing. You're going to go to random data. Instead of, well, 50 numbers, I want 100 numbers, right? Okay. I want to store this in the column n equals 100, and everything stays the same. Okay. All right. Now, column 2 has a bunch of numbers in it. It actually has 100 numbers in it. So instead of 50 numbers, it has way more. This is a sample of size 100. All right. Let's do the doozy one. Let's do 10,000. Okay. Let's go to calc. Let's go to probability. Oh, sorry, random data. We're going to store 1,000 numbers, or 10,000, right? 10,000 numbers in this last column. I'm going to tell it to store it in column C3, which is the 10,000 one. I'm going to hit OK. Ooh, and now we have Wow, we got 10,000 numbers, and it goes all the way down. So if we keep scrolling, there's 10,000 things in this column. So we have column 1, sample size 50, column 2, 100, 3, 100, right? Does that kind of make sense? Cool. All right. So now what we're going to do is we're going to construct a histogram for sample 1, sample 2, and sample 3. Okay, and the way we're going to do that, instead of like making the chart and trying to figure out where to do this, Minitab is actually really good at just making a histogram without you having to do any work. Okay, so since C1, this first column, is my first sample, let's go ahead and make a histogram. So we'll go to graph because, well, we're graphing something, right? I'm going to go down to histogram. Okay. And I'm just going to click, what do I want to do here? I think I'm just going to do simple. Okay. Now, oh gosh, I haven't done this in such a long time. Okay, in the box label graph variables or Y variable, I'm just going to click on C1 because that is my first sample, right? That's normal and equals. Okay. Let's see if they want anything else. Oh, let's go to options because that's what it's telling us to do. I'm going to click fit normal distribution. And what that's going to do is it's going to draw the normal curve above my histogram. So on top of it. Is this making any sense? I hope so. I don't know. This was like my fun idea for today, but I don't know how fun this actually is. You're just watching me click stuff. We're going to click OK. We're going to click OK. And this is what we get. We get a cool little histogram that shows all the bars. So the bars represent all the things in the sample, the smaller sample. And I have the normal distribution plotted on top of it. Isn't that kind of cool? Let's do it for the next one. All right, let's go to graph. We'll go to histogram. And then instead of the first column, I'm going to tell it to do the second column. I'm just going to make sure that it fits the normal distribution. I'm going to hit OK. Ooh, look at that. Now this one has a little bit more bars because we have 100 things in our sample, right? That would make sense to have more bars. And well, we have the normal distribution on top of it. Okay. Ready for the last one? All right, let's see what happens. Okay, graph. Histogram. There we go. Simple. Okay, this time C3 goes here. I'm gonna hit OK. Let's see what happens. Oh, look at that. Huh. Now, what? Well, how is this a little bit different than the other ones? You're skinnier, right? Let's kind of go through these. We have this one, which was a small sample. This one, which was a larger sample, and this one, which is like the largest sample. Which one looks most like the normal distribution without the overlaid graph on top? I think it's this one, right? Because like this one, it almost seems like the bars like almost form the normal distribution, right? But this one, the bars like barely form it at all, right? It kind of does look normal, but it's not like as tightly fitted to the graph as the other one, right? This one's kind of like in between, right? I mean, it kind of does look normal. It's a little skewed, but it does kind of look like it's fit in the graph, okay? So basically, what we found from this lab, this is what I asked my students to tell me anyway, is as we increase the sample size, well, if I like graph my sample, that sample well, is going to look more and more like the normal distribution, okay? So basically, if we have a population that we know is normal, the larger the sample size, the more representative of the population it is, right? Okay, so I have some activities for you on the back of this page, which you really don't have to do. Roughly draw what happens. You don't have to do that if you don't want to. But what's really important here is, well, let me write it out. I'm gonna go back here just because I'm gonna record this later and I really don't feel like drawing on the board. Okay. Okay. So here, we don't have to draw what happens. We just saw it, okay? But this is a good observation, right? As the sample size increases, okay? Well, the graph of the sample looks more like the graph of the population, right? Okay, so the graph of the sample looks more and more like the graph of the population, which was normal in this case, right? Okay, and well, that means sample size is really important, right? If we have a larger sample size, then we get something that's more representative. And that's why, like, when you make a sample of something, it's very important to try to get the largest sample size that you can. If I only take a sample, let's say I wanted to interview this class, right? And I only sampled one person, right? That is not a good representation of the class, as if, well, compared to if I sampled half the class, right? I would get a much better representation of the entire population. Does that kind of make sense? Now, I know my mini tab was kind of confusing there, but hopefully you enjoyed watching me click through some random stuff. All right. Why don't we do one more? I don't know if I'll do all of them. Let's do number one. Okay. So what we're going to do for number one is we're going to talk about how certain like variables affect what the graph looks like. Okay. So let's go to, gosh, page one. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to display different plots of 4 normal distributions. Okay. All of them are going to have the same mean, but they're going to have different standard deviations. Okay. So we're going to see what happens when we change the standard deviations of the normal distribution. So I'm going to go to graph. Okay. I'm going to go to probability distribution plot. Okay. You really don't have to know about this stuff. Okay. Basically, what I'm going to tell Minitab to do is I want you to draw a normal distribution where the mean is going to be 0. Okay. But the standard deviations are going to be different. I want them to be 1, 3, 5, and 10. Okay. Now I'm going to go to options. I'm going to say on separate graphs, just so I get different graphs. I'm going to click OK. And I'm going to hit OK. Okay. Now, what we get here is a bunch of graphs, right? A bunch of stuff that pops up here. Okay. Let me kind of explain what's going on here. Okay. The graph to the left, this is the graph with mean 0 and standard deviation 1. Mean 0, standard deviation 3. Mean 0, standard deviation 5. And mean 0, standard deviation 10. What do you think is happening to the graph as I increase the standard deviation? Yeah, it's like I'm smushing it down, right? It's getting smaller, right? And it's getting wider, right? So it kind of makes sense because the standard deviation is like how many deviations from the mean we get. So if I increase the standard deviations, of course it's going to have to get wider, right? So the normal distribution actually looks different based on the standard deviation. If we have a large standard deviation, I would expect it to be kind of like squat. And if it's like a small standard deviation, I would expect it to be really narrow and tall, right? All right. Any questions on this one? All right. So let's just draw our answers real quick. This is going way faster than I thought, by the way. All right. 3, 2, 1. Here we go. All right. So basically what happens is, well, when the standard deviation was 1, the graph kind of looked like this, right? When the standard deviation was 2, it kind of looked like this. 3, it kind of looked like this. And at 10, it looked like this, right? So standard deviation equals 1, standard deviation equals 10, okay? So the way I would write my observation here is, well, as you increase standard deviation, okay, the graph becomes shorter and wider, right? It looks like I'm smushing the graph to be shorter and also spreading out wide. Okay. Does that kind of make sense? All right, we have one more. I guess I'll do this one because this is moving pretty fast. I actually don't even know if I have my phone call. No. All right. All right, let's do number 2. This time we're just gonna keep the standard deviations the same, but I'm gonna move the mean, okay? So I know this is kind of confusing to see just because you're not really used to Minitab, but what I'm gonna do is we're going through the steps for number 2 here. So I'm gonna do graph. I'm gonna do probability distribution plot. You really don't have to pay attention to what I'm doing here. What's really important is I want to get the normal distribution. I want it graphed for different means. So I want the means to be -1, -3, 0, 5, and 10. And I want the standard deviation to stay the same. So I want the standard deviation to just be 1. Okay, just checking my options here. Looks good. I'm going to hit OK. And here we get a bunch of other stuff. Okay, so this graph here has a mean of -1. This has a mean of -3. Is that right? Yeah. This has a mean of 0. This has a mean of 5. And this has a mean of 10. So what's happening as I'm increasing the mean? Yeah, right. So it's kind of sliding to the right. And that makes sense, right? Because the mean really is just the center of the graph, right? So if I change the mean, the center of the graph just gets shifted to wherever I say the mean is, right? So if the mean is, say, 0, the center of the graph is 0. And if the mean is 5, the center of the graph is 5. Well, that's basically what happens here, okay? So let me, I hate going back and forth between these two. Oh my goodness. Okay, here we go. All right. So if you want to draw what happens here, well, basically what happens is like when the mean's -3, my graph is up here, right? When my mean is 0, my graph is here. And when my mean is 10, my graph is like over here, right? So mean -3, mean 10, okay? And I guess the way we can parse this out is as we increase the mean, the graph shifts to the right. Okay. Does that kind of make sense? Cool. Now, I was kind of hesitant doing this just because we haven't seen Minitab for a while. I'm not going to require you to use Minitab, but I think it's just kind of fun to see like some of this stuff that we can't do like by hand. But yeah, that's all I had for you today.